It was another loss to the Ottawa Senators in the Battle of Ontario. What went wrong for the Leafs? And we had a blockbuster go down in the NHL. We'll discuss Mikko Rantanen, no longer a Colorado Avalanche. That and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily things for all things Leafs, hosted by myself, David Morassutti. And joining me today is my good buddy, Austin Owens, who's pitching in for Mike, who is under the weather. So we had to switch the podcast plans up just a little bit. That's why it's out a little later than usual. So thank you all for still coming in and watching. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Austin, I hope you didn't put any money on the Leafs this weekend against the Ottawa Senators because once again, they came up not on the winning side, losing 2-1 to Ottawa this past weekend.
Yeah, not the biggest wager guy in the world. I usually leave that to the others. I feel like with my luck, it would just be, not a great time. But little bit of a tough weekend. I mean, it is what it is, right? We'll get into it more, but not any money put down on that game. Probably for the best.
Yeah, probably for the best. It hasn't exactly gone too well for the Leafs against Ottawa. I believe this is now 4 in a row that Ottawa has beaten Toronto, and it's disappointing for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's a big game, just anytime you take on the Senators, right? But also considering this is a home game for the Leafs.
We're gonna go there, right?
That prediction that Mike and I had pretty much came true. Mike said it was going to be like a 60-40. We're like 70-30 split. Even before puck drop, you heard it. It was thunderous. It also makes people realize that there are Leafs fans. They just go to different arenas, apparently. Well, you get more Leaf fans in lower bowls than other arenas. That's what I'm trying to say here, ladies.
It's a bad day to be a fan of the Sens and the Sabres generally. Not on the ice, obviously. Those teams generally, like to show up against the Leafs, but in the stands, I mean, I think we've seen it. What was it? Buffalo the last couple of years have tried to either price out Leaf fans that are coming in or just kind of just flat out say you cannot come. Don't sell your tickets to Leaf fans. So, I mean, they know what's going to happen when the Leafs come to town. Every fan's going to make that trip. Ottawa's a little bit longer than Buffalo, but it's good to see Leaf fans out there making noise. Hearing a "Go Leafs Go" chant in a away building is always kind of jarring, but it's awesome.
Yeah, I know it is. It's again, I can imagine how it feels being a player in your arena is kind of taken over by the opposing team. I mean, it happens really in a lot of places that the Leafs go where there's an abundance of Leafs fans. The Leafs are going to be not this week, but next week they're going to be going on their Western Canadian road trip, and that's another place where you really hear the Leafs fans come out, especially Calgary's one. Edmonton, there's a good chunk. It's not as much as Ottawa. And then you've got Vancouver. Vancouver's usually doing pretty good at keeping Leafs fans out from what I remember. So, but it's still, you're going to hear a lot of it over the next little bit. But let's talk a little bit about the game itself. And the one thing is being labeled at, if you looked at all the comments after the game from the players, is the unlucky bounces, the bounces that didn't go their way. Well, I mean, it's kind of hard not to disagree with that when you look at the goal that ended up winning the game for Ottawa that literally bounced into the net. I know there's some people who are talking about kicking motions and things like that. I mean, the kicking motion happened, like what you saw with the legs happened after. I'm still a little skeptical how it bounced off his leg, Shane Pinto's leg, like that. It was just kind of a weird play in general.
it's a weird play. You see that once every couple of years. I mean, I'm sure it happens more league wide but like how often are you seeing a puck that's deflected off a defender's stick over the goalie's head, off a guy's leg, back over the goalie's head, and maybe crossing the line by an inch or so? Like I was barely into the net. It was just, I wish the Leafs would get a bounce like that. That would be nice. I think I said it to you at the time, was it happens to the Leafs, not for the Leafs generally. I think the last time we saw a goal like that was when, what was it? Was it Tyson Barrie from the Oilers shot one into his own net like years ago? This was during COVID, maybe.
It's very possible.
That's how long ago it was. I can't even remember who the player was. I remember Nazem Kadri laughing about it on the ice. That's how long ago it was. But there's obviously goals that go in that are crazy for the Leafs, but bounces go one way and not the other. You always talk about, a big save at one end leads to a goal at the other. It's bounces are going one way. The Leafs didn't quite get theirs to go. I know we had talked about, a loose puck, and I think it was in the blue paint. Pontus Holmberg had 3 or 4 whacks at it and couldn't get it to go. It's one of those games where it just wasn't falling for the Leafs. You feel for Joseph Woll, because I think he had a pretty good game. You give up 2 goals, you expect to win a good majority of the time, and it wasn't a Leafs night, obviously.
It wasn't, and I think it talks a lot about what the Sens did right in this game. I think what the Leafs didn't do right in this game, and one of them being going to the net, right? Just getting bodies to the net and finding ways to get pucks through. We'll discuss a bit more of a breakdown of why the Leafs struggled in this game, but it was kind of clear. Like I think, the Leafs, it was a bit of emotion behind this. Was I believe the first game in Ottawa since the infamous Morgan Riley goonism, as some have put it to me, when he cross-checked Ridley Gregg in the face. But I don't know. It was just, there was that game. I think we also have to remember. People were frustrated with the way it went. The Leafs are missing 4 regular forwards in the lineup right now. You put Connor Dewar in that category, I guess. Yeah. But this is what happens when you're a bit depleted. You go, yeah. The last 2 games, I think you've really seen the matchups haven't exactly worked out. The moves around and how much now teams get to really pinpoint on the top line and say, all right, we're going to have to make these guys are the ones that we're going to keep our focus on and hope the other lines, we're able to, if they beat us, they beat us. Right. Yeah. And I think there was a lot of that on Saturday between the Leafs and the Senators. What else went wrong in the game? Well, we'll discuss that in our good, bad, and the ugly. And we'll also have to discuss this big trade in the NHL. And apparently wasn't the only one on the table, apparently. We'll discuss that and more here next on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here. 1 game, 2 teams, endless possibilities. Yes, it is the Eagles and the Chiefs. There's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, Patrick Mahomes, or even betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action with live betting all game long. You can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from kickoff to the final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what happens on the field, and the app is super easy to navigate. Plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's the icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get started. Just bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official partner of Super Bowl 59. The Locked On Leafs podcast continues here. David Morassutti, and joining me is Austin Owens. And of course, like every Leafs loss, we have to do the good, bad, and the ugly. And I do admit there were some positive things from this game, but also I'm curious to see, what did you find you thought was good from this game?
Oh boy. I think the Leafs puck possession was really good. I think there were a lot of series of the Sens getting hemmed in by the Leafs just constantly cycling the puck. I think that's something that's been very strong under Berube, is just down low. The forwards are very strong in the puck. I think Tavares and Pacioretty, guys like that, they've kind of been the leads with that. But Matthews, Marner, you're winning puck battles. Nyes has been really good at it. Nylander's always, got a pretty sneaky pickup when it comes to pulling the puck off defenders. It's just, I think the intention was really there. I think it was just the execution of finding. It was just a lot of passing, a lot of overpassing, and that kind of leads into some bad with it. Was you had a lot of possession, but there wasn't a lot being done with it. As far as I saw, it was a lot of just cycling and not ending up with a shot at the end because they were trying to look for the perfect shot rather than just you. I don't want to say just throw pucks on net. It's not like it's the playoffs and everything. You don't want to just shoot everything, but you'd like to end up with one or two shots in a possession where you have the puck and you're gassing the Sens and it's a minute in and they're trying to look for a change. You'd like something to go on net there, and it's just bodies in front, I'm sure, is part of that as well. I'm sure Craig Berube would like to see more guys crashing the net, and that leads to, a point shot or something going in where they hope it gets tipped or goes in off a leg. I'm rambling, but I think puck possession was a positive. I think they need to build off of that and find the end of, or the next step to that, which is putting the puck on net and then putting the puck in the net.
Yeah, they did a good job of especially cycling the puck and finding ways to keep the Senators in their own end. I think that was very apparent. And for me, when the puck wasn't in their own net, wasn't in their own end, Joseph Woll was doing his best to keep the puck out. You look at the two goals that were given up by him in this game. One was on a 4-on-3 that then turned into a 4-on-2, and Stützle gets that goal. And then the weird bounce that, it's kind of tough for any goalie when you can't really predict where the puck is going. So I thought he was stellar in this game. He was, making the extra effort on almost every puck that was in on net. So it's hard to fault Joseph Woll for that game. I know that the stats haven't been too flattering for him since I think really since the return from the Christmas break. But to me, it's got more to do with how this team has played in front of him, especially because there are games he has tried to give them every chance, and it just hasn't happened. They haven't even scored enough to give him a chance either. I only fault him for one game throughout this stretch here, and that's the one against Carolina where he allowed 6. Otherwise, the Leafs have not really done a good enough job offensively in front of him, and so you talk about the positives from this game. Again, another solid performance from Joseph Woll has to be one of those.
Yeah, I don't know how many you can really blame on Woll in this last stretch. The last 2 losses, you've gotten 2 combined goals from a team that usually scores at a very high clip. There needs to be some kind of answer because the saying is how many games are you going to win with 1 goal of support? You have to be near perfect to get a win out of that, or you have to get very lucky and make it to a shootout, something like that. So I can't really blame this stretch on Woll. It's just got to be the guys in front of him have to find a way. It's 29 shots on goal, you outshoot the opponent, you hold them to almost 20 shots against. It's an unfortunate outing for a guy that probably deserved a lot better on the night.
Yeah, I think he did deserve a better result after what he did. All right, the bad. What did you find bad from this game?
Oh, it's tough. I honestly, the biggest thing I took away from this is I don't really think Pontus Holmberg should be in the top 6. I know John Tavares is injured, and you talked about it, right? There's so many injuries. This is the time to try things out and see what guys can fit in where when called upon. I really like him as a bottom 6 effort forward. I think he gives everything he's got every shift. The high end finishing and talent isn't quite there. It's again when I was talking about, wide open puck in the crease and he whiffed on the puck twice. It's unfortunate because he's a great story. He's a 7th round pick. he's easy to root for. He's one of those guys that's very exciting, but just I would have liked to have seen some combination of Robertson, Nylander, Domi at some point when you're pushing for offense. Obviously, that comes with that line would be an absolute defensive nightmare, like just absolute fire drill in the other zone. Those are three skill guys that aren't known for their defense, but I think at some point, Brube's been good about bringing the blender out. I think it would have been nice to have seen, Marner and Matthews together, and then Domi, Robertson, and Nylander to try and push for an extra goal when your top guys, weren't exactly lighting it up.
Yeah, no, I think, I haven't been a fan of Pontus Holmberg as a top 6 option. And it leads me to wonder if that's one area the Leafs need to really upgrade, because he's a fourth line guy to me. Craig Berube talks about his energy, and in spurts, he doesn't do too bad.
No.
But when we're talking about what this team needs to upgrade on, it's getting those guys who could play those bottom line minutes, but then when they're asked to do a little bit more, they're able to. The guy has 2 goals in 38 games this year. I get it. He's not playing in the most offensively, centric roles, but he's played with good offensive players too. You just played a game with William Nylander. You only have 2 goals on the year. Fraser Minton has 2 goals and he's only played 14 games. Like to me, it's one of those things where the effort's good there. I know he's hasn't been terribly defensively. I think there's actually a little bit more to be desired defensively from Pontus Holmberg at times. He is a minus player this year, but he's not really doing it for me. And that wasn't my bad. The bad I had from this game was that the decision by David Kampf to leave the ice to go and get the stick. I get it.
That's what I was going to say. Sorry to cut you off. It's just it's an indictment on. It's a tough thing to be talking about Pontus Holmberg in this position, because who would you rather have in that 2C? Like, you can put Domi, but he's a winger very clearly that is being forced to play center at the moment because the Leafs don't have the depth. David Kampf's not that guy. He's proven that you can play him up there, but he's not going to give you much, if anything, other than stable play in the defensive zone. So, it's game, 50 something. It's not the end of the world that they're playing up there. It's just tough when you need a goal and you don't really have a lot, like the secondary scoring. It's a bigger conversation about the secondary scoring. Like you're saying, there's not a lot of guys past the top line that are really getting it done right now, other than Nylander, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, that's really, I kind of feel for William Nylander. He's on a bit of an island when, his center is Pontus Holmberg, right? Max Domi's up there, but he's got
McMahon look good. I like them together.
Right? Like it's one of those things where when I look at the way that they have spread this around, I'm not too sure. I think Craig Berube's got everything done how I would do it, in my opinion. But I mean, I'm not the coach. He is the coach. I wonder if the coach had anything to say about David Kampf leaving the ice to go and get that stick, because I get it. Some players feel useless without a stick, but what's more useless without a stick? Not having your player even out there to do anything and leaving your 2 defensemen to handle 4 players on the ice on that 4-on-3. And I mean, the Senators is like, oh, okay, so we can take our time and get our shooters set up in a better position. And the defenders, you can't ask one of the defenders to step up in that situation, because then you leave the front of the net exposed. It just, you know what? You got to ride it out. You got to hope that you get enough bodies to block it, or, force them to do other things, and maybe your goaltender can smother it. I get it that they weren't really able to do that when he was out there, but you put yourself in a worse situation by leaving. And you could tell he struggled with that decision at first, and then eventually he's like, okay, I'm gonna go because the puck's it's more closer to the corner. But it was a very quick, all right, now we're back in, now he's gone, we can put ourselves in a better position to score. I just did not like that play.
I think it would have been a lot more. I mean, on a 4-on-3, I understand both ends of it, because he's the only guy up top to kind of break up passing lanes. So I get the need to want to get a stick. It's just you can't leave your position there with the puck still in the zone. You either have to wait for a chip out or you like it's always tough when a guy goes to the bench, takes a chance. It rarely ends up well for his team because there's just a scramble that ensues. And some hockey players, some teams just thrive off that chaos that they can make something out of nothing. So, I mean, good for the Sens for capitalizing on it, but on a 4-on-3, it's tough to see a guy just kind of, even on the short change there with the Leafs, the margin for error is so small there to be able to get back into play and break something up. So obviously, in hindsight, I'm sure David Camp wouldn't have made that choice a second time, but it happened and it led to a goal. So I'm sure he's not feeling great about it.
No, and I'm sure. I mean, the penalty was also stupid. Oh, who took that penalty? I'm pretty sure that was Pontus Holmberg who took that penalty in the right and put his team down. You're 4-on-4. The last thing you want to do is put yourself in a 4-on-3 situation, and he did that.
Just untimely penalties. It's what's killed the Leafs. And
it has
large stretches this year.
It really, really has. So, I think, just not a great play. You're ugly from this game.
Oh boy. I mean the goal that went in, that's the easy one for me. Is just it's not on anybody. That's the sad thing is it's ugly, but it's what could you do differently? Like Mitch Marner did his best to clear it off the line. There's nothing he could have done differently because who's expecting a puck to bounce over your stick, look the other way, and then bounce back over the goalie's head towards you. Like it's just such an anomaly of a play that I think the only thing you can really say there, and I know people have brought it up, is the Steven Lorentz goal that got called off earlier this year. That was very similar. I think we know that the refereeing in the NHL is very hit or miss, especially on stuff like that, kicked in goals. There isn't really a precedent. It's just kind of flying by the seat of their pants and hoping they get it right and that nobody yells at them too bad because referees have feelings too, I guess. They obviously do, but the fact that there's no, precedent or the league doesn't hold the refs accountable, that's a larger discussion for a much longer podcast, obviously. But I think, the fact that, one goal is called a goal, the other one's called off. That's where it bothers me. I think if it was, both of them were called off, at least there's consistency there. I think the fact that it's basically the ref just throwing up their hands and going, I don't know. There has to be some consistency down the road and there has to be some accountability, I think. And that's more not the ugly on the Leafs. I think it's a once in a, I don't know, month, year play. How often do we ever see that? But it's just annoying when it goes against your team. Obviously, we're not complaining about it if it's the other way. We're kind of burying our heads and forgetting it happened. But it stings when that ends up being the game-winning goal.
Yeah, I think it was a weird goal, and I do agree that it's tough when you see other plays where similar things happen, and everyone was pointing to that Steven Lorentz one against Washington. I get that. It's just really hard to really get concrete. It has to be concrete for the official, and like they said almost like right away that it was a good goal. So I do appreciate the Leafs did not challenge it because I don't think they would have won that challenge and it would have led to another penalty for a delay of game. You have to remember that when teams don't challenge, it's not because they don't think the challenge they can't win the challenge. It's like, do we think we can win it and avoid getting another penalty? Because I don't think that would have helped the Leafs in any situation to get a penalty there.
No, and that's the one thing is, sorry, Dave. The kicking motion obviously it's very hit or miss when it comes to the interpretation of the rule. I think when the puck's up on his knee like that, it's going to be a hard thing to overturn. Like if it was towards there's clearly a kicking motion, but it's after it hits his leg. And I think it's easier to have a case to overturn it if it's towards his shin pad, if it's towards his skate, than if it hits him in the knee. That's a very tough thing, and you don't want to send them to a power play after they just got momentum back. That's I don't blame the coaching staff at all for not challenging that because it's just what are the odds that you're going to get a challenge? And usually when the Leafs challenge, they get it right. So clearly they thought that was one they didn't have a good chance of winning and would have just shot themselves in the foot.
Okay. I'm going to quickly go through my ugly, and I just felt like the lack of adjustments to the lineup because Bob McMahon had 6 shots on goal in this game. Austin Matthews had 1. And I kind of pointed that Matthews had 1, Marner had 2. To me, I was like, it shouldn't take Austin Matthews till the third period to get a shot on goal. And if Bob McMahon is taking 6 shots and is really feeling feel like he's doing a good job of getting offense going, why not switch around the lines but get Bobby McMahon lower in the lineup with like a McMahon, Domi, Nylander line, put somebody else up with Matthews and Marner. You could have put Robertson up there. You could have even put Pontus Holmberg up there. You could have put somebody else up there. They didn't. I felt like that was just a missed opportunity to try to get things lower in the line, because when I watched those other lines tried to get offense going, it was like pulling teeth. They couldn't get shots on net. Nobody was really it was really frustrating to watch. And you saw often enough that they went with the top 6 heavily in this game, especially late in the game. So I feel like just that was that to me. Yeah, you can have all the time of possession all you want, but if you're not getting any opportunities out of it, what's the point? Like I just, to me, that was just one of those where I get it. You're really at a struggle because you don't have your full lineup. I do get that. But like, if I'm looking at the box score here, Domi played 16 minutes. Marner played 22. Matthews played 22. I'm trying to see. Nylander played 22. Like, there were other guys, like McMahon played 20. Like, Robertson played 13, but he's at least someone you can say can get some. He had 2 shots on goal. He had more shots on goal than Austin Matthews, by the way. Like, get him more offensive opportunities, because you at least know that he has a better chance to score. Like, you gotta. I feel like there should have been a little bit more mixing up the lineups a bit, but in the end, the Leafs fell to the Ottawa Senators, and now we'll look to. They got a bit of a break here, so hopefully maybe just rest up a little bit and try to get back on track when they host the Minnesota Wild later this week on Wednesday. But that wasn't the only big news that happened this weekend. We did have a trade, and it wasn't just a trade. It was a big blockbuster with the Colorado Avalanche deciding to part ways with one of their superstars. Did they make the right move? And what does it say about the way that this trade deadline could be going about? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here with Austin Owens. And yeah, I was trying to figure out where I was Friday. Oh yeah, I was a good buddy of ours was over. I was with our buddy Jose, and night away from hockey, not really needing to watch much going on. And then all of a sudden you see you look at the good old X machine, you look at, and it's like Mikko Rantanen has been traded.
There's rumblings, David.
That took a little, and that one took some time to percolate, because you heard that Rantanen was on the move to Colorado, and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's the return? Everybody was kind of already guessing that Nietzsche was going to be one of the players going back in the deal, but like, you want to know what else was Colorado going to get. Then you heard Taylor Hall was going to Carolina. Actually, no, it was Taylor Hall to Carolina first, because Elliot Friedman reported Hall to Carolina first. Then he's like, oh yeah, by the way, Mikko Rantanen is also going to Carolina. So that was just
Very
such a strange way of it all happening. And then you see the trade, and it ends up being, okay, Chicago got a 3rd round pick. By the way, it was their own 3rd round pick, and they retained half of Rantanen's salary. And then the Colorado Avalanche get Martin Necas, they get Drury, they get a 2nd round pick, and they get a 4th round pick, while Carolina gets Rantanen and Taylor Hall. Yeah. Your initial thoughts on that move, and I'm sure you were probably as surprised as many of the people were surprised to see it, but like,
Yeah.
what made you think that, okay, I could kind of see why this happened?
I mean, as the trade details started coming out, I think it was more of a kind of a shock with a mid-season trade that has that much money moving around. You generally see something like that in the offseason where, I got either a sign and trade or they trade Rantanen's rights. That would obviously land them significantly less. But yeah, when it drops on a random Friday out of nowhere, it's just kind of like, this is very interesting. Like we're over a month away from the deadline. It's just kind of out of nowhere as it can get, where it's like, and it's Mikko Rantanen. It's a guy that's won a cup in the last 5 years. It's a guy that's Nathan McKinnon's running mate. Like that core did not seem like it was going anywhere with him and Nate and Makar, Gabe Landeskog when he was still playing. Like it's weird to see that team kind of breaking up, that cup team that was so good a couple of years ago. The first reaction is shock. Carolina is obviously a team that likes to swing for the fences. It was kind of like what Nashville was doing a couple of years ago when they were just finding a big name every single year, acquiring them when they got PK Subban, and David Poile was kind of doing what he did. But Carolina went and got Gensel last year at the deadline. They go and get Rantanen this year. It's kind of like, it's interesting to see them go for these high value rentals that they're more than likely not going to re-sign, given what we heard the salary demands were for Rantanen. But once the information starts trickling down, it's kind of like, okay, well then this guy, this and that. You kind of hear about the deals that didn't get done, which were very interesting. And then Chicago in the middle of this, that's another wrinkle that was just kind of like, okay, well, they were definitely involved. That's my biggest takeaway from this is Chicago was definitely in this trade. I don't know. Like, I think both teams did pretty well. Like Rantanen to the Canes is fun. All of the Canes is fun. Natchez is a good player. Jack Drury's still young-ish. I think he's got a lot more to give. I think there's prospects and picks in there that are, they're going to get kicked down the road. But yeah, the Blackhawks, I think that was my biggest thing, is only getting a third-round pick for $4.5 million retained. I know salary isn't much to them right now, but like we've seen teams get a lot more for less salary retained or similar salary retained. So I think it was just a weird deal. Obviously, they get Hall off the books as well, but just very odd their involvement in this. But I think a good deal for both teams given the situation that the Avs were in with Rantanen.
Yeah, so I have people wondering about Taylor Hall stuff. Like $6 million cap hit versus the 4.625 that Chicago's retained. Now, Chicago's probably, if I'm looking at Mikko Rantanen's base salary, it was $6 million this year. So you have to remember that, like, they're not retaining $4 million. They're retaining the prorated 4.625 in the cap hit, but the actual money that they're retaining is probably like what this base salary is $6 million. So I think they retained half. So about like half of that salary. It's significant savings for Chicago, who aren't competing this year, and it's a significant. Remember, you're bringing in, Rantanen at obviously 4.625, which is crazy to think. Like for 10.625, you've got Rantanen and Hall on your team. So like for Carolina, I get it. Carolina also seems to think very highly of their chances to re-sign Rantanen because they've got a lot of cap space. Tolsky said they 35 to 40 million. So I can understand that part. Now, how does this impact the Leafs? Because we have to talk about the Leafs somehow with all this. Well, first off, apparently there was another deal on the table. Ellie Friedman said that the Hurricanes were also talking with Vancouver about Pettersson or Miller. Doesn't surprise me because they clearly wanted to add a big-time forward, and I think actually Pettersson would have been interesting for them because they had the cap space.
Which Pettersson, Dave?
The one who is making a lot of money, not the one who just made
Elias
debut.
Elias Pettersson.
Oh wait, but they have an Elias. Oh, they have two of them.
They have Elias Pettersson at home, Dave.
Oh yeah, I forgot they had two of those guys. So
Yeah,
if JT Miller doesn't like one Elias Pettersson, imagine having two of them to deal with.
Yeah, it's absolute nightmare fuel for JT Miller.
Yeah, it's exactly. So I don't think that Vancouver story is going away anytime soon. It sounds like Colorado was more one to pull the trigger on the Rantanen deal because they just felt like we better get something out of them versus losing them for nothing. And I did think they were going to lose them. They were not going to pay him $14 million. He wants a lot of money, and I think a team would pay Mikko Rantanen a lot of money because he is that good of a player.
Yeah,
right.
I think just optically, Nathan McKinnon, I think it's 12.5 he makes now. It's very good for what contracts are going to be in a couple of years. Like, just optically, I don't think you could pay Rantanen $1.5 million more a year. That's 14 mils what's reported. I don't know if he wanted north of that, but
I don't think he would have wanted. I think he wanted to be the highest paid winger, which would have been obviously the 14 million.
Yeah,
but like you're thinking, people don't understand. Yes, it's a lot of money, but for Colorado, you were paying Rantanen 9.25.
Yeah,
so 9.25 to 14 million is almost a $5 million jump. That is significant to a team like that, who also have Cale Makar to re-up after 2026.
Yeah,
he ain't asking for. He's going to be the top paid defenseman in the league.
He might be the top paid player in the league by the time
he might be. Yeah, he might be getting that 14. Like that 14 million might be going to him instead.
Yep.
I think you look at. I understand why Colorado does. Now people are wondering, would the Leafs do this with Mitch Marner? No. And here's a simple reason. Mitch Marner has trade protection. Mikko Rantanen did not have trade protection.
Yeah.
And in a way, Rantanen wanted the money. He won the cup with them. He's done that. I know he probably wanted to stay in Colorado because he had a chance to win more cups there. But this was the Avalanche saying, well, you can only have one or the other. You either want to stay with us, or you want the money. So I wonder, the Leafs is a different situation because it's Marner's got trade protection. And when we're talking about Marner, let's say Marner wanted he wants more than Nylander. He wants maybe closer to what Matthews getting. And this is going to be, guys, we're going to be hearing this for the end of the year, so you might as well hear it from me now. And look, I'm of the mind that you wait until the end of the year before you even make this move, because I don't think there's no point in doing it now. But we're talking about maybe a $1 or $2 million raise for Mitch Marner versus the $5 million raise that the Colorado Avalanche we're going to have to pay Mikko Rantanen. It's a different level we're talking about, especially with the cap going up, with John Tavares not going to be making double digits in salary anymore. I could see where in the Leaf size maybe it's a little different, but again, I don't think that conversation needs to happen until you see how things go in the playoffs with everything. So, but I think what this deal shows is some teams are starting to push back a little bit on these stars who are asking for this money, and maybe it's just like we can only do so much. I mean, I'm not saying that when it comes to Connor McDavid, Edmonton's going to do that because they're going to be so stupid if they don't just give a blank check to Connor McDavid. But teams, even though the cap's going up, it's not going up for in directions that maybe some teams are hoping for. And we heard Brad Shilling constantly talk about how much of the pie they want to dole out. Fortunately, a lot of like the core is signed. You got McCabe, you got Tanev. I mean, I know as much as people don't like Morgan Rielly, you got Morgan Rielly signed. You got Oliver Ekman-Larsson signed. A lot of the heavy lifting is done here, but there are still areas that need to be improved. Center ice will likely be the biggest topic of conversation in the offseason. So, but I just think, Austin, I mean, I don't know if you agree with me, but I just think the Marner one, we don't need to have that conversation until later, but understand it is not the same situation as Mikko Rantanen.
No, and I also feel like as much as I don't mind the deal for Colorado, it's also a cautionary tale of, you don't want to trade this. Like you said, this is a deal that you want to get done in the offseason because teams aren't moving heaven and earth to get these top guys in season. You're not getting top value for a guy like Mikko Rantanen or a guy like Mitch Marner in the middle of the regular season.
Not at all.
And that's obviously tough because you only have a certain negotiating period before free agency to get a deal done. We saw that last year when there was all the talk of if Mitch Marner would get traded ahead of free agency when he was up for an extension. I just think, I think if we were talking about Mitch Marner getting traded last year, we were talking about multiple picks, high-end players, this, that, and the other. And I think Natchez and Drury are good, but I think the pick return is probably what you would want more of if you were trading a top-end guy, because you have bodies that are going to be very good in your lineup in the present, but they're not as good and don't offer you as much upside as, a first-round pick in the future, what that could develop into. So I think, I think you can get a deal done with Mitch Marner that works for all sides, especially with Tavares coming off the books, like you said, the cap going up, this, that, and the other. And I think it's tough to get a deal done that would kind of help trade came through.
Not a
big one, but
Perunovic to the Islanders from the Blues.
Well, Lou's making moves. Obviously not a big move like Marner getting traded. I feel like you're not really getting what the fan base kind of desires. You're not getting that home run deal if you're trying to make a move where you don't have a lot of leverage in that situation.
No, and that's the thing. The Leafs don't have leverage in this situation because Marner holds a lot of the cards. He'd have to agree to him to waive his no move clause. So I think you're at this point just weighing it out and hope that you get something that's going to work in terms of what your cap structure is like. So we'll see how that goes down. That will do us. That will do it for us here on the podcast. I want to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast from, and make sure you follow us on X at Locked On Leafs. And on the next episode, we'll discuss a little bit more about the Leafs plans this week. They don't have a lot of games. They do have some potential decisions they'll have to make with some injuries still impacting the lineup and maybe ways that they can try to boost their offense. We'll discuss that later here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. But until next time, keep locked right here on Locked On Leafs.